what's your academic background?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I don't have an academic background at all. I barely finished high school. Even that was challenging because you have to keep in mind I was very sick and I couldn't do any. If I did something physical, then I'm probably going to. Qatar, the rule is that no matter how long you've lived there, you cannot retire there. This is how it was alive. If so, I was born in India, and if I lived with my disease in India, I would be dead. I will say this: it was the most toxic place I've ever worked. It was so extremely toxic. There was racism. They told me that I should have it was a mistake to hire me. I don't belong there. So for me, the bullying and the racism and all of that, it actually helped me get better. Exactly. And the real great irony is I spoke at a conference this year in May in Berlin, and in the audience was the CTO from this really toxic company who was also pretty toxic. And it was this moment where I'm like, wow, man, this is the fruit of the seeds he planted, the seeds of
Hard
motivation.
on yourself because maybe you don't deserve it. You will start like questioning yourself, and imposter syndrome will come, and you will be thinking a lot. And sometimes just like you are not in the good environment, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Just change your environment, and everything will be better. And you mentioned that.
This is something I struggle with because if you're just a speaker, but you're not an engineer or you're not something other than being a speaker, then what is it you're talking about?
That's true. It's like the perfect formula. Great skills, good storytelling. That's the perfect speaker.
I spent all of 2023 just running my own business. I had a consulting business where I was an entrepreneur in Germany running my business. I was so busy wrangling all this government nonsense that I didn't actually have time to do the work.
Welcome to Yalla Let's Code podcast, a podcast where we interview a software engineer to share their entrepreneurial story. And here we are on episode number 13. And here we have Tejas. He is the host of a podcast where he also interview software engineer, keynote speaker, book writer, developer relation engineer at DataStack, investor in different startups like Flight Control, open source, and other startup. Also, he have been working at Spotify, Virtual. We will get more about his story after this intro.
Hi, Ilias. Good to be here. Yalla, let's code.
Yeah. So, Tejas, can you give us introduction about yourself? So I give like the audience a bit of what you do from your LinkedIn experience, and can you share more about and give the audience introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I've been building on the web for over 20 years. I started when I was very young, 8 years old, and I've been coding for a long time. I eventually had some internships and jobs, places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta. Now I'm an AI engineer for developer relations at DataStax. That's the short version, but I'm happy to go into detail on anything you'd like.
Yes, for sure. I will go over the detail. So the first question that I usually ask to the guests is, how did you get started in web development? So how was your first interaction with code and the computer as overall?
Yeah, that's a great question. My family had a Windows 3.1, like a very old computer, and I started with games. So Prince of Persia was a great game. And so I have a disease where it was very difficult for me to do anything physical. I could not do anything physical growing up. So I couldn't run, I couldn't play, I couldn't walk, I couldn't go upstairs. And the only thing I could do was type. That's all right. The only thing I could do was type on a keyboard. And so I started with games, but at some point games became boring and I was like, how do you make a game? And so I just started playing with programming. And from there I did make some games and I found Photoshop. And with Photoshop, what you can do is design a web page and then export it to HTML with slices. I don't know, this was a long time ago. And so you could do that. And so I started making some web pages just by playing, by trying to make things. And in the end, I ended up making a lot of websites. I was in the media at a very young age. In Qatar, we had a newspaper from Dubai called Young Times. And this magazine for youth, they highlighted some of my websites that I made when I was 11 years old. And I still have the clippings today. So that's what I've been doing. I started just by games, and there was nothing else I could do besides coding because of my illness, and now it's my job. So
That's awesome. You started very early doing development. Yeah, that's really impressive to hear, and it's good to know that with the problem that you have, that you cannot do physical activity and you manage to do this stuff. It's like very amazing.
yeah, the great thing about it is there's a lot of young people, especially these days, who I ask so many people like who are maybe 18 or they're going to university, and I say, what do you want to do? And they don't have an answer. They're often confused. I don't actually know what I want to do. And they say, maybe I'll do marketing or maybe I'll study management. And for me, I never had that problem. I never ever in my life was like, I don't know what I want to do in the future. I've just been writing code since I was 8. When I was 10, I got a diploma in C++, and everyone around me was like, that's it. That's it. You're going to do code. This is your thing. You're a programmer. From inside, from outside, from everywhere, just code chose me. And I think that's the positive side, is like never was confused about what to do with my life.
That's good to know. Yeah, that's really a good point because many of the young generation doesn't know what to do, and also because there is currently, I would say, many option and many distraction. It will be hard for them to choose which one, which like a career path or which job they would like to choose. But I think I have similar stuff that you mentioned because I have been with not bit with code, but with computer. Mostly, I was like a bit of geek. Like I was loving everything that is around tech, overall consumer tech and stuff like this. And one of the choices that I have to make is going to web development, which is really amazing, and it's opened up a lot of door and also a lot of opportunity after that. Awesome. So you start doing web development very early. You start with game, and currently you do development. And after that, what's your academic background? Did you study like computer science? How was it?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I don't have an academic background at all. I barely finished high school. Even that was challenging because you have to keep in mind I was very sick and I couldn't do any. If I did something physical, then I'm probably going to die. I was in the emergency room very soon after that. And so, like, for me, in a school year, I attended only 19 days. In 1 year, I attended just 19 days of school. Even that was difficult. So for me with school, I would just go study, write the exams, and that's it. So finished school, thankfully, but when it came to university, there was just no chance. There was because one, it was expensive, and two, I was too sick to finish. So nothing academic.
Yeah, makes sense. Got your point. And what was your first professional job that you have after you finished high school? So you mentioned that you finished high school. What was the first job that you did as a software developer?
Are you talking internship or like full-time employment?
Yeah, we can start with internship if you have one, and after that we can do like the full-time one.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I was in the 10th grade in 2008. And in the 10th grade, there was in Qatar at the time, there was a website contest. There was the University of Qatar put on a website contest, and they just said, look, anyone in high school is eligible to enter. All you have to do is build a great website, and that's it. And the best website will win. So I knew how to make websites. And it was 2008, right? So the iPhone just came out, and responsive web design was very new. And so a lot of the entries were not responsive, and they were frankly very ugly. And so I entered this contest. My mother told me about it. She said, you should enter this contest. You make websites. I said, yeah, why not? I'm not doing anything else with my life. I entered this contest, and I won the first prize in the entire country. And the first prize was 10,000 Qatari riyals. So that's equivalent like $2,000. And a full scholarship for a degree in computer engineering from Qatar University. And they never gave me that degree in the end. It sucks for them. But I got the money. And also, with that came an internship. They said, hey, you want some work experience? Come work with us. Come work for us. And we'll put you to work. We'll do something. That was my first internship. I was working on, they had an internal newsletter called Campus Life. This was a web page built with PHP. And I got to work with them on that internally. It was really fun. However, that was also, I was promised to be paid for that, but I never. Qatar is a very interesting place because people can just like decide to not give you your degree even though you win it. And that's just how it is. So I was never paid for this, but that was indeed my first internship.
Awesome. That's really good. A bit good to know about the Qatar stuff, about the degree stuff. Yeah. Awesome. And after that, you did other internship before having a full-time position?
That's right. Yeah, I've always leaned more towards the visual side of things. Actually, early career was a front-end developer, and so I care a lot about how things look and how they feel to use in terms of user experience. And so because of that, and also my early sort of introduction to web engineering was Photoshop, always been visual. And so I got an internship as a graphic designer for the United Development Company. It's a company responsible for building an island. This is the most Qatar thing, but they literally pulled an island out of the ocean called the Pearl. And this is just a new piece of land with no road signs, with no markings. And so they needed a graphic design intern to literally create signage. So that's what I did. I created signs like U-turn signs and here's a traffic light. And like, I did that. But this was the last internship before my first full-time job. The first full-time job was at it wasn't digital, it was a brand consultancy. So they did things like logo design. They designed brochure, marketing collateral, all kinds of materials like letterheads and things. And they were just noticing, hey, the digital wave is big. And so they wanted someone to join them who took care of digital stuff like websites and apps. And so I said, I can do that. And they hired me to do that. That was my first full-time position. I got to form and work with a digital team that was really great. People like Eli Abejo, Kyle Francia, really brilliant people. And we built apps and websites for various customers. It was consulting. And we really, at the time, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Like one project that we did was TL Draw or Excala Draw, like an interactive canvas that's multiplayer. So like 50,000 people could draw on it all at the same time with different colors and so on. We built that in like 2010 or something. It was very cool. Yeah, so lots of interesting projects. It was a consultancy, and that was my first full-time position as well.
That's really impressive to know all of this happened 2010. It's a long time, and I can think web back then it wasn't that really interesting or supporting as currently with a lot of out of support stuff. So you will have to do it yourself to build this from scratch. Like it is not like a out of the box solution. So you have to build everything from scratch, almost everything. That was really cool to hear this interesting product. And what was the second, to be able to have a timeline, the second full-time position? So we will have a timeline of your career path.
Yeah, this is a good question. So in Qatar, the rule is that no matter how long you've lived there, you cannot retire there. This is how it was anyways. The reason we lived there was because my father had a job and I needed the healthcare. So Qatar had treatment for my disease that helped me have I wouldn't say good, but I was alive. So I was born in India, and if I lived with my disease in India, I would be dead. No question. The treatment is very expensive. It costs what I take now. So I still have this. That's why I live in Germany. We'll get to that. But it costs now weekly about 5,000 euros. It used to cost 12,000 euros weekly. So in India, you can't afford that. You just die. In Qatar, you can't afford it preventatively, but if it's an emergency situation, they will save your life for free. Right? That's why we were living there. I had a lot of emergencies and I was nearly dead many times. One time I was actually clinically dead, like I was pronounced dead, but they saved my life for free, which is great. So I was between, it's okay. I was between the emergency hospital and my house, like at least 2 to 3 times a month, every month for 20 years. So anyway, in Qatar, no matter how long you live there, you can't retire there. So when my father was 58, in 2 years, he would have to leave the country and go back to India. And so for me, if he has to leave, I have to leave. And if I leave the country and go back to India, I'm dead. So I thought, oh, this is not good. And so I started looking for jobs in countries with social healthcare, not the United States. And I found a job in Germany, in Berlin. And this was my second job. I applied there and I said, look, I'm based in Qatar, but if you want to relocate me, I'm happy to come to Germany. And they said, cool, let's do that. This was a time where Germany did not have a lot of engineers. And they were really behind in terms of like software engineering. And so they had, it's not brain drain, but it's brain scarcity. They just didn't have people. And so they were sponsoring work visas left and right for people. And so I said, I can come. And so they got me a visa. And the cool thing is I didn't have a degree. I was not educated. And it didn't seem to matter. I think this is some type of miracle because normally if you don't have a degree, they don't let you in. I got the job and I moved to Germany for the healthcare primarily, but also the job. The job was as a software engineer on a real estate platform. It's a platform where people can sell houses or apartments or rent them. And what I was responsible for was a back office tool where the real estate brokers can look at the portfolio of properties and how many people have applied to this one, and they can automate their viewings and appointments. And when people want to apply for an apartment or a house to buy or rent, they can upload all their documents to this one centralized location, and the brokers can then look at the documents and so on. So it's just a tool for like real estate property brokers. And I was a front-end engineer on this team. I will say this, it was the most toxic place I've ever worked. It was so extremely toxic. There was racism, there was gender discrimination. It was just the worst. I would go home crying like maybe every 2 weeks. They told me that it was a mistake to hire me. I don't belong there. My nickname, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but my nickname was S-word, shit. My nickname was Shit Boy because of my skin color. They're like, hey, you look like shit, so we're going to call you Shit Boy. And so there was it was not a healthy place to work. But the reason I stayed was because of the medicine.
Yeah, I got you. I'm really sorry to hear about all of that. It's really like a frustration to hear this toxic environment. Always toxic environment. It's really stressful. It's not always, there is not a lot of discussion about this, like a toxic environment. And I think you should be more about that, and because it will lead to mental health issue and maybe like a burnout. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when you are working in a toxic environment. So sometimes it's better to leave, even if it will be like a high paying job. It's better to leave because your health is your capital, and if you lose it, no one will care. Like the first one that will drop you is your employee, so they will leave you, and you will have no one to to take care of you. So it's better to take care of yourself when it can be recovered. But if it's not, it's really hard to be in a toxic environment. And I'm really sorry for what happened to you during this like a period. And which period we are talking about? Like when you move from Doha to Berlin to Germany? At which
Yeah,
year we are talking about?
it was 2014 or 2015. I'm not sure. It was November. That I know for sure because of the weather, but it was either 2014 or 2015. And I will say this, yes, the toxic environment was very bad, but it's very interesting because different people respond differently to such events. And
Sure.
I'm thankful to be the kind of person who it was bad. I will tell you, it was so bad. I questioned everything. I was like, should I go back? Should I die? Should I not have it was bad. But I would go home crying, and then I would be home in my very small apartment. It was 45 square meters. And I would just think, man, I need to get better. One day I'm going to work really hard, and one day I'm going to be so good that people are going to invite me on their podcast just to hear what I have to say. And so for me, the bullying and the racism and all of that, it actually helped me get better, which is great. But a lot of people, it's very 50-50. Some people will just like kill themselves, or some people will be depressed, or so you never know.
Yeah.
Thankfully for me, it was a catalyst for success.
Yep. It's like your engine to be successful and to prove the one that's bullied you that you will pass them and you will be better than them. Because it's like you will have to prove yourself to the people that's bullying to you. It's really stressful to do that. Also, it's not that easy because you are like a fighting with yourself to be able to be better,
Yeah.
and it's a bit hard sometimes. Even if you have like the energy, it will be like you are pushing yourself to the limit, and you just need to be taking care of taking that in consideration because you don't want to be in a worse place mentally, physically, or emotionally.
Yeah, exactly. And the real great irony is I spoke at a conference this year in May in Berlin, and in the audience was the CTO from this really toxic company who was also pretty toxic. And it was such an interesting experience meeting him nearly 10 years later. And I'm teaching people how to do AI on stage, and that was like really problematic to me. He came up to me and he said hi, and we should hang out, and it was just such a strange experience. And it was this moment where I'm like, wow, man, this is the fruit of the seeds he planted, the seeds of motivation. And so it was painful in the moment, but it led to some very good outcomes. So all in all, it was positive.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I think sometimes you just need to take the positive side of the positive perspective of the problem. But sometimes I know that's really hard to do that. But sometimes just think about it from like a positive perspective. So you are in a toxic environment, just try to be better at your skills, like a soft skill or hard skills. Try to prove yourself to the people. I know it's hard, like I mentioned that because it's easy to mention than to do because it's really hard to do. Yeah, just to be able to think positive always about has this positive mindset about problem and take it as an engine to your success.
Yeah, I like that word, engine. That's very good.
Yeah, awesome. And after this toxic environment, what was the next job?
Yeah, so in this toxic environment, I stayed there for I think 2 years or something. And
Okay.
towards the end of it, GraphQL as a technology was very young. It was new and everybody was talking about it. And so I wanted to build something with it. And we had a meeting, and I remember I said, look, we were talking about building a GraphQL service, and I said, can I build it? And I remember the CTO, this guy, he looked at me and said, "Oh, why do you want to do some real engineering? Why don't you just go like paint pretty pictures because all you do is move pixels around?" That's what it's. And I was like, "Wow, thanks, man." He's like, "We don't trust you with this server-side stuff because that's real engineering." And so I felt bad about that, and I think that was the moment where I started looking for new jobs. Anyway, so I found a new job. It was paying me more than the previous one, of course, because also inflation. And I went to the CTO and I said, look, I need a raise. I need a reason to stay here because I have this offer that's more. And I told him I need a raise. And his reaction was to literally laugh in my face. He looked at me and he was like, you, a raise? No way. Come on. You don't deserve a raise. Surely you don't deserve this. And I was like, okay. And so I told HR about it. They didn't do anything. But in the end, it didn't matter because I had this other offer. So when he said I wasn't going to get a raise at this job, I just quit and I went and took the next job. And the next job was a company that did data science. So they were very data intensive, German based. They helped businesses unlock insights using data. It's actually years ahead of its time, a very future oriented company. They did some great work. And my task was I was just a front end engineer, so build some great front ends with React. Everything was Backbone back then, but slowly they were moving to React. Build some front ends and dashboards. And at some point, it became clear that there were more front end engineers and we needed a manager. And so that's when the CEO, Michael, great guy, he was like, hey, we need a manager. Do you want to be the front end engineering manager? And I was like, yeah, why not? So I did that. I became the manager. We had a great team. Some people from that team I consider them my best friends to this day. People like Fabian, Bernard, Mikhail Poterman, just brilliant people. We had some great people and we built some really great stuff together. We created a lot of open source. We built a lot of front ends. Ultimately, we were working on a product that made it very easy for a large company, like a large enterprise, to explore its data and also manage its data ownership and stewardship and federation. We had a great query engine called Pantheon. It was really cool. Yeah, we solved some great engineering challenges. And finally, I also, at this job, ended up going to more conferences and speaking at conferences as well. Because we were doing such great work, I wanted to share it with people.
Awesome. Good to know. And you mentioned like a good thing that you switched from this toxic environment to really amazing environment. I think, yeah, it's like a show that you are not, sometimes it's not your fault, but you are not in the right place. So just sometimes it's like not the right environment for you. Just not be hard on yourself because maybe you don't deserve it. Like you will start like questioning yourself and imposter syndrome will come and you will be thinking a lot. And sometimes just like you are not in the good environment, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Just change your environment and everything will be better. And you mentioned that you have been working as a front-end engineer and after that you have been an engineering manager, which is really good. That's really amazing to hear like the switch that happened. And you mentioned the conference and also I would like to thank this podcast episode is like on collaboration with the React Africa that you will be speaking at, and it will be happening this November 29 in Casablanca, Morocco. So if you are interested to join this conference and hear our guest speaking at this conference, feel free to click on the link that you will see in the show note or in the video description, so you can check out and you can get a ticket to attend the event. And thank you so much for Ayman for this partnership. So let's move on to, like you mentioned, like a good thing. And after that, you start doing speaking. What was your first speaking event and how was the feeling of that first public speaking event?
Yeah, the first speaking event was not a tech event. It was in 2012. It was before I moved to Germany. It was a TEDx event. TEDx. Okay. TEDx, yes, and I did a talk. It was about 15 minutes. It was about my disease. It was actually educating people about what it is, why, if they know someone with it, how do you care for them, what the details are medically. It was a medical talk, and it was very well received. There were a lot of people who were informed that day. They felt like, wow, I feel like I learned something. Thank you. And so that was 2012. The first technical talk was EU in 2017. JSConf EU was the biggest JavaScript conference in Europe. It was huge. People from Mozilla and Microsoft and Meta, back when it was called Facebook. It was absolutely huge. I proposed a talk to speak at this conference and didn't expect to be accepted because I was nobody. You have like great people like Rachel Neighbors, Ashley Williams, Steve Klabnik. You have these crazy titans of the industry speaking at this event. And so I was like, absolutely, I'm not going to get accepted to speak here. But I did propose a talk. And 6 months later, they totally accepted my talk. And I was like freaking out. I was like, what? And yeah, I ended up speaking at JSConf EU, not on the main stage, on the side stage, which is very fitting because it's like nobody. Yeah, but that was the first one. We talked about JavaScript and how JavaScript is a language that is so approachable because it doesn't have strong opinions. You can do class-based programming, you can do functional programming, you can leave out your semicolons. It doesn't care. It tries to be as accommodating as possible. And that talk resonated with a lot of people.
And the first technical was at GS. And how was the experience with the first talk? Like at the
It
public
was
speaking?
crazy. Yeah, I had never been. Do you mean first talk or first technical talk?
Yeah, the first technical talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never been to a big tech conference before. Meetups, lots of meetups, and not conferences, but like somewhere between a conference and a meetup, like events. This was crazy. And they rented out the Berlin Arena. There was ice cream trucks. The stage was massive. It was like I was like, wow, this is huge. And I was even more blown away that it's such a big event and they would let me speak there. Absolutely crazy. It was mind blowing. The thing I remember the most was Twilio. Twilio, are you familiar with Twilio? It's a
Yes,
technical,
yeah.
it's a company that,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, they make texting and so on. They sponsored this and they had the best swag. They had sunglasses, they had a game, Twilio Quest. It was just so cool. And a lot happened at that first event, but I will never forget Twilio at that first event. That was just very cool.
That's really good to hear. And after that, I think you start doing more conference from probably, and you will get familiar. And you are currently presented as a keynote speaker. Can you elaborate more about this title about keynote speaker? What does it really mean?
Yeah, with pleasure. I don't know what it really means. I just know that conference organizers tell me you're doing the keynote, and I say, great. But if I can guess, I think a keynote is just the first talk.
Yeah, the opening mostly.
Probably. But it's interesting because I've had the privilege of speaking at conferences all over the world. And it's because in India, a keynote is just a talk. Like every talk is a keynote. Hey, I really liked your keynote. Oh, but it wasn't the first. Yeah, it's a keynote. So I have no idea. It's one of those terms that business people invented to sound important. So for me as a keynote speaker, I sometimes give the first talk at a conference. That's what I consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. That's really good to know. And I think keynote speaker is like a paid gig, so you will get paid to be a speaker.
It depends on the event. Some events are not. For example, JS Heroes is a non-profit conference. They don't make any profit, and so they don't. The crazy thing is, they don't. They're non-profit, but they do pay speakers. They pay speakers a good amount of money, actually. It's good for them. So with JS Heroes, for example, if I do a keynote, yes, it's paid. At Smashing Conf, organized by Smashing Magazine, if you do a speech there and a keynote, you get paid. But some conferences are run by like small communities and they don't have money. And so they don't pay, and it's okay. That's not why I do this. I've never
Yeah, it makes
ever
sense.
done this for money. Yeah, but it just depends. For me, a keynote is what the organizer says it is.
Yeah, makes sense. Just I would like to highlight this thing just because we are talking about software engineering and entrepreneurship, so people can get the flow between the two, and like more about the business side of thing and the money side of sure.
Yeah, I think a keynote speaker should be paid. Absolutely should be paid. 100%. It's not always paid. But I also think I've seen a lot of people who are like professional speakers, and that's all they do. They're just like speakers. And this is something I struggle with because if you're just a speaker, but you're not an engineer or you're not something other than being a speaker, then what is it you're talking about?
Yeah,
You know?
makes sense.
I personally am not that. I don't understand that. And unfortunately, I've seen this at conferences where somebody shows up and they go to stage and they literally are a professional speaker and maybe they brand themselves as a speaking coach. And the talk is 30 minutes about nothing. But it's done in a way that's very engaging. And you're just like, what? Why am I here? And so I definitely try to avoid being that. I think also, like as an entrepreneur, there's no value in that. The value is what can you build and share with people? What can you teach other than just being a speaker for the sake of being a speaker?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I have the same opinion about the stuff that you mentioned about this professional speaker because I think the selling point for them it's like the storytelling. They are good at storytelling and making engaging conversation, but at the end there is no like added value for that person that at that event, like from a technical side, maybe like from like a personal coach or something that may be good, but you are at a technical conference and you will like hear some personal stuff. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I got your point and I agree with you.
Yeah, because like, what I would not want to be that. I would not want it because also the danger with such a thing is you end up selling a dream. You end up being a motivational speaker. Like, look, and I could easily do this if I wanted to. I could say, hey, look, I had a disease and I was gonna die every 2 weeks, but now I have a great life, and this can be yours too, right? I could be this person, but I would rather not sell a dream. I would rather sell skills. Or actually, I wouldn't sell anything, but I would rather give you, like, here's what AI engineering means. Here's how you can be an AI engineer. Go learn this and then call me if you need help. I think that's way more practical.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like the other side is it will be like a like e-commerce guru if you are like I heard about them, like they are just selling the dream, not like the skills. There's no added value there,
Yeah.
just the Instagram picture.
Exactly. But what if you could have both? What if you could have someone who's super great at storytelling, but
Yes.
also very skilled to back it up? That's your
the
Kelsey
perfect.
Hightower. That's your
Yeah.
that's I know people like that. I know of people like Kelsey Hightower, Sarah Drasner, right? Like these people, absolutely bananas. And for me,
Yes.
that's something I am inspired to be. Like I draw inspiration from. I want to be like them one day.
Yes, that's true. It's like the perfect formula. Great skills, good storytelling. That's the perfect speaker. That's really awesome. Can we like give this like the range for the like the I would say the gig of being a keynote speaker? If you mind, Cherry. If not, it's not a problem for sure.
You mean money?
Yeah, like the range of.
Yeah, it depends on the event. So like for smaller events, it's like $250. For large events, it's $13,000 for one talk. It just really depends. I've done all kinds of things. Sometimes you make 5 figures, sometimes you make 3.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Just people to be aware of that. So the next thing, I think, after the job that you mentioned and you started doing like a speaking event, you switched to another job. Okay, can we
That's right.
have more detail about this one?
I just had lunch with a good friend of mine, Tony Kronert, and he asked me over lunch, he said, "Hey, where are you working now?" And I said, before I could answer, he said, "The reason I'm asking is every time we have lunch, you have a new job." I've changed jobs a lot. After this company, I joined a company called G2I. It stands for Good News to Internet. And what they do is they're a recruitment matchmaker. Oh, now they would describe themselves as a hiring community. They have like 400 engineers in their
Okay.
team, and companies like Uber and Meta, whoever, will come to them and say, "Hey, I need 4 engineers for this project." And so they match the company with the engineer. And the cool thing that they do that a lot of companies don't do is that they vet both sides to see if they're qualified for each other. So in the case of the company, they make sure the company is going to treat the people right. And in the case of the engineers, they make sure that they have the skills they say they have. So they interview and vet both sides. And so I was the lead engineer here. I reported to the CTO, and my job was to actually build AI systems to candidates who are applying to join G2I's team. They would be given a code challenge, and they would upload their code challenge to a system that I create. And they would upload a zip file or GitHub repo. And then my automated AI system would read their code and read all the files, all the dependencies, and give you a score, A, B, C, D, E, F. You get a good score, for example, if you have tests, if your README actually makes sense, it's not some default project README. Are you paying attention to the conventions of the framework? So if you're using Next.js, like, are you actually building according to Next.js best practices, for example? There's heuristics. All of this was internal and good, believe me. And in the end, it was a very fast track way to judge the quality of someone's code challenge. And of course, there's human in the loop. So when someone uploads it, we create a report and we say we found XYZ, these 3 problematic things. And then a human would be responsible to go look at that and make sure it was actually problematic and not just some false positive. And in the end, we decide, okay, does this person now make it to the next stage or do we reject them? So I built that system. Among other, I built a lot of things, but this was the main job. It was honestly the best leadership I've ever seen in any company, ever. The CEO, Gabe Greenberg, he's a good friend and one of my greatest mentors. Also, the CTO at the time, Lee Johnson, was just an absolutely brilliant person and the best culture I've ever seen by far.
That's really good. And at which year we are talking about, like when you joined this company?
Yeah, this was in 2019.
Oh, okay. So before, I think, the hype of the AI, or starting the hype of the AI.
It was long before the hype of AI. But the question was, when we were talking about me joining, they said, look, we feel a lot of pain because we have just a few people who it's their job to sit and review code project after code project. And they have like 300 projects, but like 5 people. They're like, how can we review all of this so fast? And I said, what if you just automate it with AI? They said, what do you mean? And so like we started talking and I was like, yeah, I'll just build this. And so that's what I did.
Awesome. That's really good to know. It's really impressive project that you like work on in 2019. It's really impressive. Yeah, that's really good to know. And what was the next job?
So after this, it was 2021 and I had an opportunity at Spotify. This was interesting working at Spotify. The company was they work mostly in offices, but because of COVID, everybody had to work from home, and
Yes.
they were not so familiar with remote work, and so communication was pretty challenging. I was responsible for a team that deployed. So Spotify created a project called Backstage. It's open source. It's like GitHub. What GitHub is to repos, Backstage is to microservices. Similar thing.
Okay.
So in Backstage, you've got organizations, which is teams inside the company, and each team can own many services, microservices. One for authentication, one for captcha, one for image generation, whatever, right? And so in a company like Spotify, you've got tens of thousands of microservices, all with very strange names like Thor and Mjolnir and Neptune. And you're like, what is this? And so, like, discovering microservices and understanding what they are, who maintains them, what's the status, when was it last deployed. Spotify had a tool called Backstage. It was internal. They built it, was great. And they accidentally leaked it at, I think it was Google I/O. Wow, what's that? And so Spotify said, okay, fine, we'll open source it. So they open sourced the tool, but they didn't open source Backstage as it was inside Spotify. They rewrote it and open sourced the new version, the new rewrite.
That makes sense.
And so my team was responsible to take this new Backstage and adopt it internally, migrate Spotify's old Backstage with a new open source one.
That's really interesting. That's really good to know, and it's really impressive product. That's because I never work with the microservices, but I already know what is microservices and the architecture behind it. But it's like I mentioned, it's really hard to manage microservice and also because of the name, and also because they are like having weird name. You cannot tell what this microservice is about and who managed them. So it's really a good product, and I think people will check it out. That's really good. And I think after that, you switched to Vercel, if I'm not wrong.
Oh no, Vercel was long ago. Sorry, I completely missed, because the reason is Vercel was very short-lived. I think I was at Vercel for about 6 months. It is definitely less than a year, so I didn't even include it in the story. But Vercel was between the data job and G2I. It was just before G2I.
Okay.
Vercel. Yeah, that was interesting work. Vercel had no developer relations team. Now there's people like Lee Rob and Delba and a bunch of folks, but and great folks. Vercel had no one for developer relations back then. And the way I got this job was actually really cool, because Guillermo, the CEO of Vercel, just wrote me a DM on Twitter. He was like, "Hi, you're a gifted communicator. I want you on my team at Vercel." And I said, "Wow, thanks, man. Let's do it." Yeah, he explained to me, look, what Vercel does is there's the cloud, and we bring it down. We bring the cloud down to developers. And I was like, cool, I can definitely work with that. And so I did. It was really great. It was a short-term thing. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because the team was very scrappy startup. It was very small. It wasn't even called Vercel. It was called Zeit. Very small team, moving extremely fast in San Francisco. Meanwhile, I'm in Germany, and there's also people in Russia and in Japan. And so coordinating that with a team that is that cracked, for me, was very challenging at the time. Of course, now they've grown and there's people in more locations and so on. But yeah, that was in 2018, 2019.
Awesome. That's really good to know. And thank you for mentioning this part, because that's really good. And after your job at Spotify, I'm not talking about Shopify. There's like a confusion between Shopify and Spotify. And there is a meme about it. So we're talking about Spotify. And I think after that, you start working as a developer relation engineer at the current job, if correct?
No, that's not true. Okay. You're wrong. After Spotify, I went to a company called Zeta, data with an X. And what they do is they just create hosted Postgres. It's Postgres in the cloud, accessible over HTTP, with the best developer tooling for working with Postgres. Honestly, it's all TypeScript, it's type safe, it's absolutely brilliant. I was the director of developer relations there, so I was responsible for making sure developers knew about and loved Zeta, and really just doing feedback from developers to the team and from the team to developers. I was the communication channel. I had a great team. Some of my friends from previous jobs joined me. Really fun times. After that, I decided I don't want to be an employee anymore, and I spent all of 2023 is running my own business. I had a consulting business where I helped a number of startups with developer relations. I helped them reach developers and teach developers how to use their thing. Yeah, that was all of 2023. It was difficult because I live in Germany, and Germany hates small businesses. Germany makes it absolutely impossible to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know anyone, actually I know just one person who's succeeding at running a startup in Germany, but they don't seem to want it. And they made it very difficult for me in the end, I was already thinking about shutting it down. But then my current employer, DataStax, we started a conversation, and this conversation went very well. It went extremely well, to the point where I was like, great, you know what? I love this so much. I'm going to shut down my thing and join you.
You mentioned that it's really hard in Germany to be able to have a small business to succeed. What is really hard about it?
Good question. One, I don't speak German very well. In the language classification, I'm a B2, which is
Okay.
so the minimum requirement for business is B1. So I'm already better than that. I'm a B2. Still, all the discussion around business terms is done in German, and not just German, but like business German, which is very complicated. Second, taxes are super complicated, and this is something you don't want to get wrong, because if you get wrong, they come back to haunt you like 20 years from now, and then you go to jail. I certainly didn't want that. I tried to find a tax accountant, a decent one, who also spoke English. Impossible. Currently, as of this day we're recording, nobody can have success as an entrepreneur finding like English speaking tax consultants. They're all completely fully booked. They're not taking on new clients. And the reason for this is because you remember when I moved to Germany, I said that there were very few engineers, right? They had a scarcity of engineers.
Yep.
So what happened over time was the engineers went like this. They grew. Lots of engineers showed up, usually foreigners, but the tax people didn't increase in the same number. And so you have now, after 2 years, engineers get their permanent residency and they decide they want to be entrepreneurs. So there's this huge amount of people now who are wanting to be entrepreneurs, but the number of tax consultants didn't grow to match them.
Yeah, makes
And so there's just absolutely no tax consultants. And so I struggled with this. I had the worst tax consultants, I will say. They once told me that I owed 27,000 euros one quarter, and I didn't even earn 27,000 euros in that quarter. So I was like, what are you talking about? And so I sent them an email. I was like, where is this coming from? Here's my statements. And they said, oh, sorry, that's a mistake. You don't actually owe anything. It's like,
Wow.
I was like, you have one job. You can't make this mistake. That happened
expensive
2 or 3 times. Yeah, that happened 2 or 3 times. And also, all their communication was in German. And I told them, I was like, look, the reason I pay you is because you promised you would speak English. And so we just had to have a lot of these exchanges. So that number two. Number three, you have to pay. So insurance and tax is different. And navigating the local insurance system is very complicated. And I didn't want to mess with my health insurance. That's the reason I'm in Germany. Number four is when you reach a certain size, and indeed, my consultancy was the fastest growing developer consultancy in Germany at the time. And when you reach a certain size, you have to have memberships to certain affiliations and clubs. One of them is called IHK in Germany. And I would get these like random, very large bills, receipts, invoices for membership fees. Yeah, and you have to pay this membership fee by law. And the membership entitles you to invitations to exclusive events and advice and other things that I don't need. And so I said, why do I have to pay? I run a developer relations consultancy, and my job is to participate in events at conferences. I don't need more invites. You just have to pay it. And so number four is that there's just like way too many like hidden things that you're expected to pay that nobody tells you about. And if you don't pay them, you go to jail or you get a fine. And I was like, this is so bad. And so there's just no respect for the entrepreneur who just wants to ship and build something. And this is not me saying this, right? Like if you go on any social media, you'll just find that Europe, specifically Germany, is the worst place to innovate, but it's the greatest place to regulate. And I think it's a huge problem. For example, there's still places in Germany where you have to pay with cash only.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm talking about like
Absolutely.
establishment, restaurants. It's just unbelievable. It's living in the Stone Age. And I wish for any entrepreneur not to start a business here, but Estonia is a great alternative in Europe. So if I was to start this again, I would probably start it in Estonia.
Yeah, it makes sense. Estonia is like one of the first digital, like a country. They are doing a lot of innovation. Like you can like get, like you can start your company from online. You don't. I think most of the administrative stuff are online, and Germany is like what you mentioned is like at the other side. And also in Germany, there are still good amount of online e-commerce delivery, like a cash on delivery as a payment method. So they are still using cash for e-commerce also. There's like a good amount that I read like back then about e-commerce in Germany. So it's
Really embarrassing because the general consensus in Europe is that Germany is the leader of the European Union. They won't say that, of course, because they're scared of being leaders because they tried that in 1943 and it went badly, but like they are. And still, they're probably the most backward in terms of technology in the European Union. Like Poland is years ahead of us. And it's just sad, really. Anyway, so DataStax showed up and I was like, yes, this is actually... I've been thinking I don't want to deal with German nonsense anymore. And with DataStax, I'm an employee. So I don't have to deal with any government stuff. And they run the business. I'm just a number. I love it. I love it this way.
that's really good. It's like remove all the headache that you will have to deal with the German administration stuff and tax. So just show up and do the work and you will get the pay.
Yeah. And just let me actually focus on the work, right? Because like when I was an entrepreneur in Germany running my business, I was so busy wrangling all this government nonsense that I didn't actually have time to do the work. And then, okay, you'll say, why don't you hire someone to do it? Absolutely. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a scarcity for people who do those jobs because the number of entrepreneurs went up significantly, but the number of other professions stayed. And so it's hard to find people. And then if I'm finding people, then I'm not spending time, again, like doing the work. It's just impossible to actually do the work you care about as an entrepreneur in Germany. At least that was my experience.
Yeah, makes sense. Got you. So your current job is developer, relation engineer, doing generative AI, data stack. And also you are like an investor in different company like a Flight Control, Open Source, also Grab, Nebula, and also advisor at Orama. Can you give us more detail about this other side of your full-time stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say. There's companies that are doing great work, founded by people who I respect. And when they're raising money, seed money for their companies, I write them a check. I here have some money, with the hope that they build something very successful, that the money that I give them grows in value to either 10 to 100x, somewhere there. And if they choose to sell my shares or sell the company, then I realize those gains. But I think it's with angel investing, it's extremely risky. I'll say this confident, like I believe in the founders, but I don't believe in their companies because I think we all just know that most startups fail. And so the founders are great people. They're gifted, they're wonderful, they're remarkable, but the economy is the economy and business is business, and most businesses fail. I think if somebody's interested in angel investing, it has to be money that if you set it on fire, you won't notice. It has to be that kind of money. And so I've given away a lot of money, and I say given away because I don't expect to realize any of it in the future. Now, if I do, that's going to be a great surprise and a happy accident, but yeah, we'll just see where it goes. I think if you're going into angel investing already thinking about your return, you've already failed. It has to be money that you, in your mind, you just have peace. This is never going to come back. And then when it does, you're probably going to be better off.
Yes, that's true. Because this is like one of not it's one of the risk of being a business angel investor because you don't need you will have to spend or like as you mentioned give away the money and you don't expect in return because most of them fail, and if one fail it will give you all the money that you're giving away to the other company, hopefully, if it's this is like a
Like if you
formula.
give 5 companies like 50,000 and 4 of those fail, but the one company 100x's, you've made 5 million.
Yeah,
Like that. Or 50,000 times 100. Yeah, it's probably 5 million. So something like that. And so yeah, you just diversify a little bit and hope for the best. But it's not the only investment I do. That's one tier. I also have a ton of safe investments with larger companies and index funds and so on.
awesome. Thank you so much and for sharing this stuff. It's really important because software engineering also need to invest and other stuff, and it's really good to be able to hear investments because there are also some people that like investing but they don't show that in their LinkedIn account, and it's really great that you show that so we can have a discussion about this stuff. And you mentioned really good point about business angel investing, and hopefully the audience will benefit from that for sure. And also I think the last title that you are doing a lot of great things which I really appreciate. You are also like a book writer, so you write a book called Fluent React. I think you write it like back then. Can you like give more detail about this book and the business and the technical side of it?
Yeah, so the book, I was approached by O'Reilly, the publisher, to write it.
Okay.
So I did. I don't say no to people easily. Somebody comes to me, says, hey, can you write a book? I'll probably say yes. Somebody comes to me, hey, can I be on your podcast? Yeah. Can I? It's very rare that I say no. I would say no only if someone's going to do some real harm or some damage. O'Reilly came to me, they said, can you write a book? I was like, yes, let's do it. So I did it. It was great. It took 2 years. The book is about not how to use React at work. There's plenty of content. There's actually just go to react.dev. The docs will teach you that. The book is more about how React works on the inside. And it's the underlying mechanism. This is very interesting because a lot of people maybe want to get inspiration to build something like React, or maybe they're facing similar struggles at work where they need to create some type of efficient mechanism for user interface updates. And so it's how does React work on the inside? It answers that question fundamentally. And yeah, it's just a deep dive on also the concurrent features and all of that. That's the technical side. The business side, I think O'Reilly is very transparent with their royalty model. If they're not, I'm sorry, O'Reilly. But it's what they'll do is royalties are 10% on physical book sales and 25% on digital book sales. So if you want to buy the book to support me, go buy the digital one. But again, this is not something I did for the money, right? I don't care about the money at all here. I did it because they asked, and if they ask again, I'll do it again. I mean, the main reason being I've got plenty of money. This sounds maybe bad, but I have a job that pays me a decent salary. I've got investments. I don't need more. But if it is more, I won't say no. You know?
Yeah, for sure. No one will say no to money.
Unless it's like evil money, right? Unless it's
Yeah,
I
that's
ordered
true,
your
that's true.
sister. Here's some.
If it's like a clean and legal one.
Yeah.
So I think we cover a lot of ground here about your story, and it's really amazing to hear your story. And it's my first time that you heard your story. I check out all the projects that you did, but I never heard your story, and it's really amazing to hear your story. It's really inspiring, and I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing your story. And also, you will be in Morocco hopefully soon, so people will enjoy your talk. So if people are interested, they can go to React Africa. I will leave the link in the show note and the video description, so you can grab your ticket and you will see our guest in person in Morocco, and you will have a lovely chat with them. So don't be shy and say hi to them when you see him. And I think my next question will be resources, link, and anything that you would like to share with the audience to be like a more like a entrepreneurship. I would say it's like a mix of software engineer and entrepreneurship, and you are a good example of that. And I would like for you to share some really good resources that you use or currently you still using to be able to do all of this amazing stuff.
Yeah, so I'm building a resource, not to compete with you, Ilias, but I have my own podcast that is also about tech and entrepreneurship. That's you can find my book, you can find everything at tej.as. That's my name, tej.as, tej.as. We'll probably put a link to that in the show notes. I'm also on social media, on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on LinkedIn as well. Just search for my name, you'll probably find it. About resources, I think there's a lot. So I love reading. There's a lot of books that I've read. Not so much books about entrepreneurship and money and tech, but books about life and health. And I think those are way more important, because if you can get your health in order, you unlock so many superpowers and productivity. And some books that I've read recently that I absolutely love and I think are worth reading for everybody. Book number 1 is called Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. It's a book of, it sounds a little bit woo, but it's about the science of energy. It's about how your mitochondria make ATP, and it's what happens when you eat food. It's an excellent resource for understanding how to get your diet and exercise in order so that you can actually be more productive. Good Energy is a fantastic book. There's a book called Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke. It's about addiction and really understanding the balance between pleasure and pain. And she makes the case that if you're not doing anything difficult, but you're experiencing a lot of reward, you're going to be depressed. And she really highlights the value of hard work to get pleasure. And I think it's a really great book. And then finally, the other book that I absolutely love is a book called Hope for Cynics by Dr. Jamil Zaki. He's a psychologist, and he talks about, he was an optimistic person, but after COVID, he ended up becoming very cynical, and he hated people, and he thought people are the worst. And he studied the best worldview. Is it a cynical one, or is it a skeptical one, or is it a maybe overly positive one? And in the book, he talks about what's the best way to view the world that can optimize for your happiness and the happiness of people around you. It's an absolutely brilliant book. Finally, if I can add one more, it's called Solve for Happy. I forget the name of the author, but this guy was like the number 2 at Google. He owned like 3 Rolls Royces. He was a multi-millionaire, maybe billionaire, but then his son committed suicide, and he was just never happy. He had literally everything, but he could not find happiness, no matter how much money, how much success. And in this book, he applies engineering to actually discover, how do we actually be happy? Like, is it money? Is it power? What is it? What's the formula? And the formula is in the book. Those 4 are my go-to. I absolutely love those resources. I would recommend them to anyone listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much for mentioning all of this. The last one is Solve for Happy, Engineer Your Path to Joy with, I think, by Mo Gaudat.
Yeah, Mo Gaudat. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's Arabic.
Yeah, I can tell that. Awesome. So all the risks that we mentioned will be in the show note. If you are seeing, or if you are listening over Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you are watching us from YouTube, you will see that in the video description. Also, you can check out the website, Yalla, Let's Go. You will have all the show note and all the podcast episodes there.
That's
so
right.
Thank you so much, Tejas, for accepting my invitation. It was a really pleasure to have you in the podcast. And thank you so much for your time. I know you are busy, but thank you for squeezing the time to have this amazing podcast. And all the resources that we mentioned, all the things that we mentioned will be at Astronaut, as I mentioned before. And thank you so much for your time.
Habibi, yalla, let's do it. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.